Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Pinsetter1991 and making another tutorial today. Some of you have probably seen this video I put out a couple weeks ago. I drew Machu Picchu, if you've heard of it. It's the Peruvian Incan ruins, the ancient ruins. And I was able to visit Machu Picchu and take some pictures. And so this is one of the pictures that I took. I decided to draw it, and it's just a really beautiful mountain range. And then you can see the ancient ruins later on. But basically, you can apply what I drew, how I drew these mountains. You can apply it to any mountains that you want to draw. It's all the same principles, basically. So I decided I'd go over the techniques that I used to draw these mountains so that anyone who's watching will be able to use these techniques. But all I'm doing right now to start off is I got a basic outline of the tops of the mountains, all the peaks. You can see them in the background too. I used a lighter pencil than these ones that are up close. But that's all I did to start off. Just get a basic outline so I knew where the mountains were. And you really want to work in layers. So the next thing I did was I got this brush. It's kind of funky looking. It's a DuoPastello is the name of it. It's made by Habico. I think it's made in Germany, but it's a really good brush for. It works really well with charcoal and pastels because it's really, really soft, and you could use it to blend in charcoal. You can see what I did is I had charcoal powder. I've actually just been saving it from when I sharpen my pencils. I sharpen them into a jar, and all the powder collects in the bottom. And I decided I'd use that powder for something eventually, so this is what I used it for. You can use just like compressed charcoal and shave it off into a powder, or however you want to do it. You can figure it out, but that's the way that I went, is I used powder. But basically, I'm just kind of brushing it on smoothly, and I try and make kind of change the values, so that you'll get the idea that there's actual like ridges and valleys going, through the mountain range, which you'll see a little bit later. I'll skip forward, but that's basically all I'm doing right now, is kind of going through layers, starting with what's furthest away, the mountains that are furthest away, and working my way forward. Normally I'd start with the sky, but if you check out the original photograph, the sky is completely white. There's just nothing, no like visible clouds or anything like that, so I didn't do anything with the sky. So now moving on, you can see I've got some ridges. Now I'm using this different type of pencil. It's actually an eraser. It's called a Faber-Castell Perfection eraser. And it looks like a pencil, and you can sharpen it like a pencil, but it's actually rubber inside. You use it like an eraser. So just going along these ridges that I've made, now you can really see where I've made areas darker in the background and lighter, to give the idea that, there's actual mountains, there's valleys in between them. And there were a few trails going up through the mountains, which left like little lines. So that's what I did with that eraser pencil, the Faber-Castell, is I made that line going up just to kind of give the effect that, somebody's cut through the trees there and made a trail. But if you check out the original photograph, I was really going back and checking that reference the whole drawing, the entire time that I was drawing, just to be able to visualize what I was going to put on the paper. And that's usually a good piece of advice that I've heard multiple times, is that whenever you're drawing something from a reference, a photograph, or if you're drawing a person, especially like a portrait, you should be looking at that person or the photograph, the reference, at least every few seconds. I've heard most people say like every 5 seconds you're supposed to look at the photograph and then go back to drawing. That way you get a good sense of what you're drawing, what the texture details are that you're putting in there. So I'm pretty much done with the mountains in the background. I'm going to go ahead and lighten them up a tiny bit to give more contrast between those mountains that are far away and these closer ones. So for that, I just grab a kneaded eraser. This is something that really comes in handy because it's something you can actually mold into like whatever shape you want to use. So if you can find yourself one of these, they're really useful. And also because they don't, you can really just barely touch them to the paper and they'll lighten up wherever you touch. So that's cool. You know, it's easy to make highlights with them. But I did that just to get a little bit more contrast between these mountains that are here, you know, up close, or closer at least, and the other ones in the back. And now I'm just going along with just a piece of Nitram charcoal. And just what I'm really doing is always checking the original image, my reference image, and seeing where the darkest areas are. And that's kind of how I work with any drawing that I do, mainly with landscapes, but also with portraits and things like that. I kind of go through this system where I look for all the really dark areas and start drawing them in, just shading them in. And after that, I start looking for lighter areas and start shading them in. Then at the end, I look for the widest areas or highlights, and I either erase them so that they show up, or I draw them in with white charcoal. Another interesting thing that happens in most landscapes, I mean, you look up landscape pictures on Google or wherever, or landscape paintings. Something that a lot of artists apply to the painting or drawing is something that naturally happens, and that's that the further away things are, the lighter they are. So the hills that are in the very back, you can see that they're lighter than the ones that I'm drawing right now. And that gives it a sense of like atmosphere. It's kind of something that just naturally happens with the atmosphere of the earth, especially if you live in like a populated area. Like I live in Southern California, there's lots of cars around here, and sometimes it gets kind of smoggy. So, you know, you look outside. I live at the base of Big Bear Mountain, so there's lots of mountains around where I live. And, you know, when I look at the mountains that are furthest away, it's really obvious that they're much lighter than the ones that are closer. And, you know, the shadows are much lighter compared to the shadows of the mountains right around my house. So if you apply that to your drawing, that'll give it a much better sense of atmosphere, you know, that there's actually atmosphere, or maybe even fog. If you want to make it look like fog, you can make it really light. But that's something that I'm applying right now. You can see that the peak that I'm working on right now is a lot darker than those hills in the background, the mountains in the background. And you can do that with any drawing, really. Landscape drawing doesn't really work with portraits, but landscape drawings, any beach, fields, buildings, cities, the further away they get, the lighter they are. And obviously there's going to be less details because they're further away. So as I get closer, you know, I'm kind of making more defined lines and much more contrast in the values. Okay, so we are getting close to finishing this peak, and I was mentioning earlier, one of the last things I do is the highlights. So for this, I'm using a General's brand white charcoal pencil, which I've sharpened very sharp so I can get fine details in there. So there's like little rocks and things on this particular mountain because it's so steep. Trees can't grow all over it, or vegetation can't grow all over it. So a lot of the rocks show, and they reflect quite a bit of light, or some of them are just light in color. So using this white charcoal pencil to draw those in and just get a little bit more contrast. And that's pretty much all there is to it. The main thing that I want you guys to focus on, not only when you're drawing mountains, but in most landscapes, is drawing details really isn't the most important part. You don't have to, draw every little stick and twig and bush and plant. Really, you should concentrate more on the values that you're drawing. The darkness, the lightness, the light areas. And sometimes something that helps to focus on that is if you don't really look too close at your reference image, or if you squint your eyes so that you see it kind of blurred, then you can really concentrate on, okay, so that's the lightest area, that's the darkest area. You're not looking at, oh, there's a rock there that I have to draw, or there's a plant there that I have to draw. Don't worry about that. Especially in the beginning of the drawing, don't try to do a lot of details. And especially with mountains, some mountains, like this one that I'm drawing right now, does have like a lot of rocks and stuff like that, but that's not what I'm really concentrating on. I'm just trying to get lights and darks. And this applies to whether you're using color or black and white. Just get the lightest areas, the darkest areas, concentrate on that. And you can't really go wrong. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you guys today. I really hope this video has helped, that you'll be able to apply it in your own drawings. Be sure to send me any drawings that you do to my Facebook page. I love to see them. And thanks a lot for watching, guys. Post any comments below. I'll be happy to respond. And take care. Good luck.